When the Buddha achieved enlightenment and the wheel of his teaching started rolling, it said that there was a seismic reaction in the entire cosmos, a spasm throughout the universe. And it's a strange universe. I'm Kevin Caldwell. Welcome to Sacred Wisdom, Sacred Texts, an exploration of some of humanity's most influential sacred writings. They've become my soul friends, daily companions, spiritual guides, and springs of wisdom. When people say, I'm really into Buddhism, often what they mean is that they're attracted by ideas of compassion or maybe a general sense of wanting to cultivate mindfulness. And these are good instincts. The Buddha's path, however, is a lot more complex than that. And that's become very clear in our explorations of the Four Noble Truths and the very brief overview of the Eightfold Path. As we'll see in future episodes, each of the four and the eight are like wells. They each hold depths of practice, insight, and philosophical and psychological nuance. And while mindfulness is like a main artery running through the entire body of the Buddha's teaching, delivering oxygen to the whole of it, it's a much more complex and challenging thing than popular expressions of that term might suggest. The same is true of the term compassion, and we'll be looking into all of that. Equating the Buddha's teaching with compassion and mindfulness is not so much wrong, though, as it's just simplistic. It's like someone who hears me talk about through hiking for multiple weeks in the high mountain wilderness and then replies, "Oh yeah, I really love backpacking. I did an overnight once in the high Sierras." We're going to dig more deeply into the teaching of the Buddha, but in the course of working through this sutta, we come across something else first that we need to look at, something we might call the cosmology of the Buddhist worldview, the nature and makeup of the universe, seen and unseen. Just at the point where the Buddha completes his description of the Four Truths and declares his own awakening and enlightenment as a result of fully realizing and experiencing and knowing them, the sutta describes a universal cosmic reaction to that event. There are human reactions, certainly, but also reactions among what are called the Devas, and characters named Brahma and Māra. This episode is going to seek to understand what all that is about. And here's what happened right after the Buddha declared that he had achieved the enlightenment in the words of the sutta. When the Blessed One had set the Wheel of Dhamma in motion, the Earth Devas cried out, saying, "Near Vārāṇasī in the deer park of Isipatana, the Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled Wheel of Dhamma that cannot be stopped by contemplative or brahman, deva, Māra, or Brahma, or anyone at all in the entire cosmos." On hearing the Earth Devas cry, the Devas of the four great kings took up the cry, the Devas of the 33, the Devas of the hours, the contented Devas, the Devas delighting in creation, the Devas wielding power over the creations of others, the Devas of Brahma's retinue took up the cry, all saying, near Vārāṇasī in the deer park at Isipatana, the Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled Wheel of Dhamma that cannot be stopped by contemplative or brahman, deva, Māra, or Brahma, or anyone at all in the cosmos. And so in that moment, that instant, the cry shot right up to the Brahma worlds, and this 10,000-fold cosmos shivered and quivered and quaked, while a great measureless radiance appeared in the cosmos, surpassing the effulgence of the deities. Now, when I'm watching a series with multiple episodes, I don't mind the recaps, but if there's a preview at the end of an episode, I don't want to watch. I don't want to know what's coming. And my life partner is kind of the opposite, by the way, so we sometimes have to navigate all of that. But my point is that with what I'm about to do, I'm going against my own preferences. I'm leaning more towards hers, because I'm going to give you a summary of what will happen next. I'm going to give you a condensed version of how I've come to understand this universe that's described in the portion of the sutta that we just read. And here's how I would describe it. We, all of us, are part of a cosmic cycle of beginning, declining, ending, and beginning in which every being, seen or unseen, known or unknown, is in various stages of either being increasingly stuck in the suffering of craving and attachment, or increasingly free from that stuckness. In the Buddha's world, the middle way, the eightfold path that includes the Four Noble Truths, is the way to freedom for this entire 10,000-fold cosmos, freedom from being stuck in that cycle. Well, what is that cosmos like? Who are these different beings, and what does all of that we just read mean? What is that they cry out in the passage, and why? And what does all this have to do with the Wheel of Dhamma, the way of the Buddha, the eightfold path that we are invited to follow? Well, let's first talk about what's the cosmos like, the 10,000-fold cosmos. And let me just start with that phrase. This is a way for the Buddha to express his vision of the vastness of the scale of the universe, or better, universes, thousands of world systems, all interconnected. It's a vision of plurals, plural galaxies, plural universes, plural suns, moons, planets, and heavens, whether literally or perhaps to be understood as every world having the equivalence of all of these things. In this sutta, the main point of mentioning the 10,000-fold cosmos is to emphasize that the Wheel of Dhamma, the teaching of the Buddha that's set in motion by the awakening of the Buddha, affects the entirety of each world and of all worlds. It is universal in the plural, or maybe to coin a phrase, universal. Well, who are these characters that are said to populate this cosmos? The sutta mentions devas, Māra, Brahma, contemplatives, Brahmans, and then humans. 3 of these are human beings, and 3 are what some refer to, though incorrectly, even in the translation I used, it was referred to this way, as deities or gods. Let me deal with the humans first. Contemplatives, Brahmins, and humans. General category. That last one is, like I just said, a general category. It's sort of a catch-all, basically, for all of those who have not really done what it takes to be in the other 2 categories, contemplative or Brahman. That means they haven't set out on the journey. They haven't gone forth, to use the Buddha's term. They're still stuck in illusion and craving and suffering, and they aren't on the path to get out of it. That broad general category is to be seen in contrast, as I've just said, to the other 2 groups of human beings. So let me first look at contemplatives. And these are those humans, among all the rest of humanity, who have gone forth. They're the monks or recluses, the bhikkhus, who have renounced the normal life of the householder, again, to use the Buddha's term. They're pursuing the middle way, working their way through the eightfold path, but are not yet enlightened. And then there are the Brahmins. These are those among the contemplatives who have not only gone forth, but have become enlightened. They're no longer fettered by attachments. They are, like the Buddha, people who have reached the end of suffering. Now, I want to highlight something here, or at least they're very far along on that path. I want to highlight something here. That definition of a Brahmin is revolutionary. It will not be obvious to us, probably, but the Buddha's way of understanding the term Brahman was, and I'll use the word again, revolutionary. He undermined an entire social system with it. In his day and time, that was the word for a hereditary class, something you were born into. Society was characterized by 4 main Vārnas, sometimes called castes: warriors, scholar priests, merchants, and laborers. The Brahmins were the priests and scholars, the highest of the Varnas, based on the tradition of what are called the Vedas, sacred scriptures in most of the Hindu traditions. In this system, one cannot become a Brahmin. One is either born a Brahmin or not. But in contrast, the Buddha says that a Brahmin is a person who has attained that status through righteous action, purification of the mind, freedom from craving and attachment. In other words, the path. And now we get to a very mysterious portion of the section, at least to those of us not familiar with this world. I'm going to refer now to the non-human classes of beings in this cosmos, namely the Devas, Brahma, and Māra. And let me begin with that overarching category of beings, the Devas. In Buddhism, Devas are shining ones who inhabit various realms where they've been reborn. They're not immortal. They're not outside the cycle of samsara, namely suffering and death and rebirth. They're not gods. They are beings at different stages in the process of enlightenment and the cessation of suffering. Deva is a category. There are different types of them. We could say that Deva is like the genus, a group of related similar species, and then this sutta would include a number of the species of Deva, a bewildering list of them. Earth-dwelling devas, devas of the four great kings, the 33 devas, devas living in the air, contented devas, devas delighting in creation, in other words, devas who create their own objects, devas who are masters of others' creations, that is, they utilize what is created by others, devas of Brahma's company, that is, devas who are in states of deep meditation. Now, rather than trying to explain each of those, for our purposes here, it's more helpful to describe the way that Buddhism categorizes the devas relative to the realms they inhabit. The realm in which a deva dwells depends upon the progress in which that deva has made or not made towards enlightenment. In that sense, the analogy of genus and species begins to break down, because at the end of the day, the devas are only different as a result of their progress, not really as a species. There's three of these realms: desire, form, and formless. Let's look at the desire realm first. This is the realm of those devas who still have mental perceptions and sensory experiences in response to various stimuli. They're still in the realm of having and wanting to have experiences that are deemed pleasurable and desirable in response to various stimuli. And this implies there's a degree of attachment, which means there's still suffering. Then there's the form realm. These are devas with physical forms, though different from human bodies, we might say, more refined perhaps. These devas are evidently free from attachment, and they experience mental states which are very similar to the way that various states of meditative absorption are described in portions of the Eightfold Path, as we'll see when we get to those. And then there's the formless realm. As the name implies, these devas have no physical form. They've attained higher levels of the absorption I just mentioned, an advanced contemplative mental state beyond what we typically think of when we use the word meditation. This is the world, the cosmic reality of the Buddha. This is what the universe is made of, or we might say what it's populated by. We share this world with the devas, and vice versa. While the realms just described are genuinely distant from the human realm, some devas are depicted in various Buddhist literature as interacting with enlightened humans to hear the Dhamma. And the Buddha is often described as a teacher to both humans and the devas, because they too need the Eightfold Path to experience enlightenment and liberation, just like us. Now that's an overview of devas as a genus, a class of beings. But there's two devas mentioned specifically by name, Māra and Brahma, and we need to look at those. I'll start with Māra. Māra is a deva, not a different type of being than the devas, even though singled out. Of the three realms that the devas inhabit, Māra resides in the desire realm. although in the highest dimension of that realm. Think of it like being in the best neighborhood, we might say, of a city named Desire. Māra is a powerful being who is in some ways a personification of desire, death, and the sort of distractions that keep beings trapped in the cycle of samsara and suffering. Often called the evil one, Māra seeks to induce passion, fear, craving, and also hesitation into the ways of others. In fact, Māra tried to do all of that with the Buddha prior to his awakening. Buddhism also sometimes refers to four Māras, not necessarily because there's four of them, but because of different functions. It's a way of referring to all the ways that Māra is said to stir things up, as it were. Māra is involved in death, not just the physical death of a person, but death as ending, any kind of ending, the ending of anything, everything in this chain of suffering. Māra is associated with inciting craving and attachment, and so with the bundling of the five aggregates of existence we discussed in previous episodes, the bundles that tangle together form and feeling and perception and thought and even consciousness itself. So Māra is busy. And then there's Brahma. Brahma is also a deva, a high-ranking, powerful being of the non-sensual world, in one of the highest realms in all of Buddhist cosmology. But Brahma is still bound within the cycle of suffering, beginning, declining, ending, beginning, declining, ending. Brahma is sometimes called a creator, but we should keep two things in mind. First, there's no creator in the ultimate sense, as understood by, say, the Judeo-Christian Islamic heritages. In Buddhism, the physical world is uncreated. It is eternally changing, expanding, contracting, transforming, but it never didn't exist. And the second thing to note is that there are multiple Brahmas. The Brahmas are supporters of the Dhamma, the teaching, and they're deeply respectful of the Buddha. They live in higher, non-physical, non-sensory realms characterized by profound levels of what we would call meditation. Buddha speaks of four, or Buddhism speaks of four Brahma Vihara, or states of being: compassion and empathy, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These can be translated as Brahma abodes. The term Brahma Vihara could mean Brahma abode, a sense of being where and how Brahma abides and dwells. They're the character traits, you might say, of this higher state, this higher way of being. And these four describe the character qualities, you might say, of Brahmanas, we might say: compassion, empathy, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are going to resurface as we proceed further in future episodes. So Māra tempts and seeks to obstruct others on the path to enlightenment, while Brahma is an example of sort of the pinnacle or near pinnacle of meditative attainment. However, again, both are still susceptible to the cycle of existence. Neither are in the state that Buddha described as nibbana or nirvana. This is the cosmic reality of the Buddha's world. It's a cosmos inhabited by many different beings: devas, Māra, Brahma, Brahman, contemplatives, and of course the rest of humanity. But all of them, every being, even the most powerful, are still subject to another cosmic reality, this samsara, this chain of suffering. Beginning, ending, beginning, ending, beginning. But it's not just they, remember, and I'm going to repeat my summary here that I began with. We are part of a cosmic cycle of beginning, declining, ending, and beginning, in which every being, seen or unseen, known or unknown, is in various stages of either being increasingly stuck in the suffering of craving and attachment, or increasingly free from that stuckness. In the Buddha's world, the middle way, the Eightfold Path, which includes the Four Noble Truths, is the way to freedom for the entire 10,000-fold cosmos, freedom from being stuck in that cycle. There is another element in this cosmic reality. And that's the element of the Buddha's teaching. We've noted that the Dhamma, the teaching, is needed in every dimension of existence for every being in the entire cosmos. This explains why the Devas all cried out in response to the Buddha's declaration, "I have awakened." So let's look at the cosmic cry now. Here are the words of the sutta again. When the wheel of the Dhamma had been set in motion by the Blessed One at Vārāṇasī in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahman or deva or Māra or Brahma or by anyone in the world. That's what they cried out. Now, there's two main points that I want to touch on in that cry. The wheel of the Dhamma is set in motion, it's rolling, and it can't be stopped. It feels to me like a cry of hope, or at least a cry that gives me hope. The Dhamma impacts the totality of existence, including beings in the highest realms. The Dhamma is irreversible. It's a revolutionary shift that has taken place in the world's consciousness, and nothing can reverse it, according to that cry. Now, I realize that for the Buddha, everyone has to do this for themselves. No one can follow the Eightfold Path for someone else, and it doesn't just automatically work. But the cry of the cosmos depicted in the sutta seems to suggest that there is something inevitable about the eventual freedom of all beings. The wheel is rolling, and it will not stop. It can't be stopped. And that's with a sense of hope. Now, if the wheel is rolling, and if we each have to get on the path ourselves to roll with it, so to speak, then this seems like the time to begin to look more deeply at those elements in the Eightfold Path that we haven't discussed yet. But first, I want to raise a question that I've come across in my research. Is this actually cosmology, or is it psychology? And let me explain. In some interpretations, the various deva realms are not understood as a literal depiction of cosmology. In this understanding, the devas are not actual beings, they're metaphors. And when I say interpretations, what I mean is typically more sort of scholarly, modern interpreters trying to understand what's going on here. For those who do interpret things this way, the devas represent various psychological states of all those who are in stages of the path, including the sort of meditation, mindfulness, and contemplative absorption that are described within the Eightfold Path as aspects that we are all to cultivate. So which is right? Is this cosmology? Do all these beings exist? Or is it psychology? Are they representing mental states that we're all in pursuit of? Well, actually, to frame this as an either-or question would be a very non-Buddhist approach. Both can be true depictions of the Buddha's thought, and I would assume that that would be the Buddha's reply. Both. Yes. The Eightfold Path includes mental states and levels of contemplation described in the elements of the path referred to as right mindfulness and right absorption. These are two of the elements which we have not looked at yet. These mental states do correspond with the realms of various devas, but that doesn't mean that the depiction of these realms is reducible to a metaphor, or that these realms are only symbolic of mental states. I think the Buddha might say that Brahma and the other devas in the higher realms reflect these mental states because the Eightfold Path is real. It's the way for all beings to awaken, and all beings are in some stages of that process. The psychology of the Eightfold Path is the psychology of the cosmos, you might say. Cosmology and psychology are not two distinct categories. Well, this is a natural segue to return to those 8 elements. Think of the Eightfold Path as a collection of boxes, each of which contains more boxes, like Russian nesting dolls. We've only opened one doll, right view. Inside of right view, we found the 4 Noble Truths. And inside of one of those Four Noble Truths was, lo and behold, the Eightfold Path. But there's 7 more dolls waiting to be opened, and I will get started next time.